The world of military defense has evolved significantly over the years, with cutting-edge technology and strategic planning paving the way for the most advanced military bases on the planet. These facilities represent the forefront of military innovation, showcasing the latest technology, strategy, and preparedness to meet challenges of our contemporary world. So join me as I count down the top 15 most advanced military bases in the world. Number 15. Kubinka. Located close to Moscow, the Kubinka Air Base was opened in 1935 and has been a central hub for the military ever since. In fact, it's usually home to the best squadrons of the Russian air and space forces. Since Russia has some of the world's most advanced fighter jets, this makes Kubinka extremely important to Russia's war in the Ukraine. However, given the Russian military's secrecy, little has been made public about the facility. Number 14. Base 37. In recent years, world governments have become more and more interested in getting involved in space, and China's no exception. Earlier this year, the People's Liberation Army announced the building of Base 37 in order to track, analyze, and identify objects in space. And presumably, this type of technology will allow the Chinese to do everything from monitor satellites to detect incoming ballistic missiles. Number 13. Longpo Naval Base. More than half of the world's annual merchant fleet tonnage passes through the Strait of Malacca, Sunda Strait, and Lombok Strait, and Longpo Naval Base is right there to intercept it if necessary. Located along the coast of Hainan Island in the South China Sea, it's home to a fleet of up to 20 nuclear submarines. This base is mostly located underwater and hidden away in a series of caverns, making it a top-secret base of operations. Number 12. Temporary Deployable Accommodations. Temporary Deployable Accommodations, or TDAs, may not be as high-tech as a built-up base. However, they are a massive innovation in the way the U.S. does warfare. Large enough to host up to 600 troops, they take less than a month to set up. Each tent is built with PVC barrel covers and composite insulation, and every tent uses a vacuum waste distribution system and wastewater treatment plant that is so effective that the wastewater is nearly drinkable. As such, these accommodations help create great military bases on the fly, and they've been used in countries such as Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Number 11. The Yulin Naval Base. In recent years, China has been actively ignoring international law by claiming that the entire South China Sea is its own. Yulin Naval Base has played a major role in that effort. Strategically located on an island in the northwest area of this body of water, the 25-square-kilometer base has some of the best geographical defenses on the planet. Sheltered by a protected harbor and mountain range, it's home to some of China's most advanced weapons, with this including everything from its nuclear-powered subs to its most powerful battleships. For added security, most of the base is underground, making it near impenetrable in the case of a conflict in the region. Number 10. Mount Yamantau. Of all Russia's military installations, one of the most secretive and likely one of the most high-tech is located deep within Mount Yamantau. This can be found in southwestern Russia's Ural mountain range near the border with Kazakhstan, and it's one of the highest mountains in the area. But beyond that height, what makes it special is the fact that it's home to a top-secret base. While a lot of the details are only speculative, throughout the mid to late 1990s, U.S. satellites observed extensive excavation efforts in the area. When American authorities questioned Russia about this excavation, they got a flurry of conflicting responses, with these including claims that it's a mining site, a repository for Russian treasures, a food storage area, and of course a bunker for top officials in case of nuclear war. In fact, the response to questions surrounding this place in 1996, Russia's defense ministry stated that, quote, "The practice does not exist in the defense ministry of Russia of informing foreign mass media about facilities, whatever they are, that are under construction in the interest of strengthening the security of Russia," end quote. This led to some tensions when, in response to a tour of America's equivalent facility known as the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Russia did not reciprocate, signaling to the Americans that Russia had little interest in strengthening a post-USSR partnership. As such, U.S. intelligence services are certain that Mount Yamantau is a military and communication base of some sort. However, the unfortunate truth is that it's unlikely that the Russian government will ever admit to what's truly going on down there. Number 9. Pitufik Space Base. In recent years, the Arctic has been heating up in more ways than one. Well, thanks to a little bit of global warming, its ice has quickly been melting, and this has opened up waterways that may just be a prime location for shipping and global trade. If all goes to plan, the American Pituffik Space Base is primed to play a major role in this development. Located in northwestern Greenland, it's primed to counter Russian and Chinese influence in the Arctic region and detect impending nuclear attacks. It also has pretty solid facilities, and it's not only home to the world's most northern deep-water port, but also features a 3,000-meter runway that handles more than 3,000 U.S. and international flights per year. Perhaps most importantly, the base is home to a substantial portion of Space Delta IV's all-new missile warning sensors and Space Delta II's space surveillance and space control sensors. Yet while it may have its fair share of strategic advances, both living at and maintaining the base has proved to be a challenge. It's known to drop to temperatures as low as -44 degrees Celsius. It's periodically battered by winds of upwards of 180 kilometers an hour, and it's nearly inaccessible for many months of the year. It's also worth noting that just this year the base was subject to a name change. In the past, it was simply referred to as Thule Air Base. However, in 2023, its name was changed to Pituffik, in a nod to the area's traditional Greenlandic name. According to Chief of Space Operations General Chance Saltzman, quote, "This renaming represents our wish to celebrate and acknowledge the rich cultural heritage of Greenland and its people, and how important they are to the sustainment of this installation against the harsh environment of the North Arctic Circle." End quote. In any case, it seems to be that the U.S. continues its military buildup in the Arctic. Places like Pituffik Space Base will continue to be focused on. And while the base's extreme living conditions make it a less than ideal place to work, Pituffik will continue to grow in importance for the foreseeable future. Number 8. Pine Gap. While the United States has many important bases within its borders, Pine Gap may just be the most important one outside the country. Located smack dab in the middle of the Australian outback, it was built between 1966 and 1970 in a joint effort between the two countries, and is easily one of the most secretive and complex military bases on the planet. This complex is staffed by about 800 employees who work a series of 38 radar dishes or radomes that are concealed underneath golf ball-like shells. As per the info from the Edward Snowden leak, these high-powered satellites' primary purpose is to collect data from around the world and use it for both intelligence and military purposes. On one hand, Pine Gap plays an important role in missile detection. While this was a little bit more important during the Cold War, it likely continues to be used in this way today, and in doing so provides early warning of ballistics and nuclear missile launches. However, its far more important use is as a tool of global surveillance. What is fairly certain is that the facility is able to pinpoint the locations of airstrikes, nuclear weapons, and other military intelligence hubs. It was because of this that it played an important role in the wars against Afghanistan and Iraq, where it would be used to help coordinate the U.S. battle plans and drone attacks. However, its far more sinister use is as a tool for global surveillance. Supposedly, the employees at Pine Gap have the ability to listen in on practically any phone call on the planet, and by all accounts, it's a serviceable command post for satellite-related intelligence missions. It's also apparently precise enough to find the locations of terrorists and get their exact locations, making it easier for the U.S. to conduct drone strikes against them. As such, while Pine Gap may not look all that fortified, its capabilities are pretty scary, and it plays a large role in maintaining America's stranglehold on global security. Moving on to number 7, the Gerald Ford class. While not a military base in the traditional sense, in today's day and age, aircraft carriers have played a massive role in projecting power. After all, it's these bases that are essential in controlling the air and water, and while there are many of them out there, it's America's Gerald R. Ford class that's considered to be the world's most advanced aircraft carrier. At the moment, several are slated to be built, but the first Gerald Ford class carrier was completed in 2017, and as of now, a total of 3 are currently in operation. Costing approximately $14 billion a pop, it was built as an upgrade to the old Nimitz class and outcompetes it in several ways. For example, it has a ton of automated technology on board, and as a result, it requires 500 to 900 less crew members to operate than the preceding Nimitz class, and therefore costs about 30% less to maintain. Besides the lower crew count, it also outcompetes the older Nimitz by being able to conduct 160 sorties per day instead of just 140, by having the ability to produce about 150% more electrical power, and by it being possible to interoperate it very well with other Navy, Army, and Air Force vessels. It also has a very high weight and stability allowance to accommodate for the added weight of new systems that will be installed over the ship's 50-year operational life, while its ability to hold up to 90 aircraft and use weapons such as Raytheon Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles and a close-in weapons system make it an elite warfare machine. Best of all, there's a pretty solid chance that the Gerald Ford class will continue to be improved as time goes on. That's because there's a belief that systems such as free electron laser, electric armor, and advanced tracking systems will one day be added on. Of these, the free electron laser is perhaps the coolest, making use of high-speed electrons and photons rather than just photons with conventional lasers. The Navy believes that they will be useful in defending against cruise missiles and small boat swarms. Therefore, as technology continues to improve, so too will the Gerald Ford class. Number 6. China's Cambodian base. In recent years, China's been on the rise, and this has led to them creating their second overseas naval base in Cambodia. It traces its history back to the 1970s, where during the Cambodian Civil War, British and Cambodian authorities worked to rebuild what was then a small one-pier outpost. Over time, it became relatively modernized, and was rather uncontroversial until 2019. That's because it was in this year that Wall Street Journal broke a shocking story. According to their sources, the Chinese People's Liberation Army was given exclusive access to about 1/3 of the Ream Naval Base for up to 30 years. This was relevant because it gave Beijing a new southern flank on the South China Sea, which is crucial given the fact that they have claims on the entire body of water. Things have heated up further after recent reports have shown that Cambodia not only has knocked down one of 2 US-funded buildings on the base, but is also using Chinese funds to modernize it. Satellite imagery have shown that between August of 2021 and July of 2023, there was a dramatic uptick in construction materials at the site. Now, there's an entirely new pier, and both piers at the base are extremely capable. After all, they're large enough to accommodate any ship in China's naval arsenal, including the new 300-meter-long Type 003 Fujian aircraft carrier. It's because of this that the US is a little bit worried that China no longer has 30% of the base, but in practice, control over the entire operation. According to US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, quote, "And when it comes to the Ream Naval Base, I think countries throughout the region would be very concerned if any one country had exclusive control or use of any portion of the base, or was doing anything that undermined the security of other countries in the region. So I think it's important to have transparency and to make sure that the base is open to all, and not the exclusive use of any one country." End quote. However, the reality is that only time will tell whether or not this once hidden base will play a major role in the region. Number 5. Fort Knox. Of all the military bases out there, few are quite as secure or as famous as Fort Knox. It's located in Kentucky in the United States. Plans to build a fort there first began during the Civil War. However, after the U.S. Army deemed the area to be of little military importance, it was temporarily abandoned. While the Confederacy took advantage of this lack of military buildup to conduct raids throughout the area, it wasn't until 1918 that a military installation known as Camp Knox was created there. Camp Knox served as a training ground for U.S. troops, and in 1932 America's first mechanized cavalry troop was stationed there. This led to a flurry of developments, and today Fort Knox is one of America's premier training centers for troop development. On one hand, the fort has some great facilities that allow soldiers to receive top-tier training. For example, Fort Knox is home to the Digital Air-Ground Integration Range, or DAGIR. As the name suggests, the range allows for any activities that occur on it to be coordinated with separate air missions, even if those air missions occur either at a different base or abroad. This coordination is possible thanks to some super advanced computers, and in total the complex comes in at an astounding 12 square kilometers and cost about $45 million to build, with this a rather low price tag only being possible due to it using some of the old infrastructure from an old shooting range. Beyond this role, Fort Knox is far more famous for holding about half of the United States' official gold reserves. Home to about 75 million troy ounces of gold, the security at the bullion depository is very tight. Guarded by the U.S. Mint Police, there are multiple guard towers, fences, and an undisclosed security feature that stops you from getting in. However, even if you do find yourself inside, you'll have a tough time getting around, as almost nobody is familiar with its very complex layout, meaning you'll be on your own in terms of getting from point A to point B. If that wasn't enough, the safe is extremely difficult to open, and believe it or not, no one person knows all the procedures necessary to open it. As such, the Fort Knox Bullion Depository building is nothing short of impenetrable. Number 4. Guantanamo Bay. While Guantanamo Bay may be advanced, it's for all the wrong reasons. That's because it not only is the site of a highly fortified military base, but also one of the most depraved and systematic torture sites on the planet. Guantanamo Bay first got its start in 1903, when Cuba agreed to lease the land to the United States as a coaling station and naval base in perpetuity. While the rise of a socialist government in 1959 led to constant calls for the U.S. to return the base, the U.S. has, unsurprisingly, refused, and it didn't take long after 1959 for the base to become extremely important. In the context of the Cold War, it would be the possible staging ground for an invasion of Cuba had it been deemed necessary, and it was because of this that the base was pretty well equipped for such an operation. While the Cold War has since ended, the site continues to be under U.S. occupation, and as of now, more than 8,500 sailors and Marines are stationed there. However, the unfortunate reason why Guantanamo Bay has a spot on this list is due to its status as being one of America's most infamous prison facilities. While the United States has euphemistically called the facility a site for, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques, quite recently, a prisoner by the name of Abu Zubaydah was able to pass on detailed images of the torture he experienced to his lawyer. In short, he's been waterboarded countless times and has been subjected to gruesome acts of violence, sexual and religious humiliation, and prolonged psychological torture. And while many of these tortures are too graphic to be described here, some have included force-feeding through the nose, random and relentless beatings, and being chained and subjected to hunger, cold, and loud music. These are done because he is not a citizen and has no rights, and since it's all happening off American soil, there's less pressure for it to be stopped. When worst comes to worst, in recent years there's been evidence to suggest that Abu Zubaydah is innocent, and a report by The Guardian seems to suggest that he's being locked up without any solid evidence against him. So yeah, I think you'd agree, while technically advanced, Guantanamo Bay is an absolutely horrible place. Number 3. Raven Rock Mountain Complex. If a nuclear World War III were to happen, it's almost certain that the majority of the United States' military and executive branch would be shuttled away to Raven Rock Mountain Complex. Located high up in the mountains of President Biden's home state of Pennsylvania, it was approved by President Truman in 1950 and built between 51 and 53 in order to serve as a command center in the event of a nuclear catastrophe. Commonly referred to as the Underground Pentagon, it has Emergency Operations Center for the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. In total, it consists of 5 separate 3-story buildings, and these not only contain the basics such as power, water, and clear air circulation, but also facilitate a medical and dental clinic, fire department, post office, dining facility, snack bar, dormitories, chapel, barbershop, fitness center, bowling alley, and believe it or not, even a Starbucks. Since 2 on-site power plants make it completely self-sufficient, it can operate for long periods of time without any outside access. According to the U.S. government, that timeline is a minimum of 30 days in a completely sealed-off position, and in the case of an emergency, a total of 3,000 people can be accommodated there. Of course, this leaves us with one important question. Has there ever been an event important enough for the Raven Rock Mountain Complex to actually be used? Well, there haven't been any major nuclear attacks since Nagasaki and Hiroshima. 9/11 was pivotal enough for the compound to serve as an emergency purpose. While not all officials were whisked away there, Vice President Dick Cheney was housed in the complex. This was done so he would be far away from President Bush, keeping both of them separated and safe in case 9/11 led to a more numerous string of attacks. Thankfully, it hasn't been deemed necessary to use it in an emergency capacity ever since. However, if tensions don't soften between the US, China, and Russia, there's a very real possibility that it could one day have to go into emergency mode once more. Number 2. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The United States is undoubtedly the world's strongest military power, and by most accounts their strongest and most fortified military asset is Cheyenne Mountain. It's located high up in Colorado. This underground city fort traces its origins back to the Cold War. It was during this time period that the United States was constantly at odds with the USSR, and there was a very real chance that this would escalate into a nuclear war. This in turn necessitated the creation of a secure nuclear bomb-proof fort, and the Cheyenne Mountain Complex became just that. Constructed between 1961 and 67, it was built underneath more than 750 meters of granite, making it near impossible for any type of bomb to puncture all the way through to the base, even if subjected to a direct hit. The 15 buildings within the base are further protected by a system of more than 1,000 giant springs and a set of flexible pipe connectors. These work together to limit the movement from the shaking of a bomb, an earthquake, or EMP to a maximum of 2.5 centimeters. In the event that an explosion happens close to the door, this can be repelled thanks to the fact that the 25-ton door can deflect a 30-megaton nuclear explosion from as little as 2 kilometers away. At the same time, a network of blast valves with unique filters are present to capture airborne chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear contaminants, making it near impossible for anyone inside to be harmed, no matter what's going on outside. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex was the central command center for the United States Space Command and NORAD. However, since then, the fort's role has changed. After all, from 2008 onwards, these two organizations have moved their central command centers to nearby Patterson Space Force Base. Yet this doesn't mean that Cheyenne Mountain Complex is no longer important. That's because despite the change in designation, this complex now serves a role as NORAD and US Northcom's alternate command center. In this capacity, it's still used as a training site. And of course, if things were to go sideways and there was to be a World War III, I'm quite confident that some important military personnel would be stationed there. Number 1. The Maginot Line. Depending on who you ask, the Maginot Line is one of the most incredible or the most useless forts in world history. It came into existence almost entirely thanks to World War I and the rise of Germany. You see, France was keen to avoid a repeat of the destructive trench warfare that happened within their borders between 1914 and 18. This meant fortifying the French border to prevent a German attack. And in the context of 1929, the best way to go about that was by building a wall. At this time, the armies of Europe were not mobile or armed with enough to surpass such a formidable fortification, and by the time it was first opened in 1935, the German army would have had an extremely difficult time getting through it. This was mostly thanks to the fact that it had some top-notch features. State-of-the-art for its time, it had no less than 142 large artillery forts, 352 fortified gun emplacements, and 5,000 smaller bunkers and pillboxes. These forts were connected by a series of underground mess halls, hospitals, recreation facilities, and railway lines, making it so that troops could be moved easily and so the defenders could live comfortably. However, despite all of this planning, the Maginot Line became obsolete very quickly. In the period of just a few years, the Maginot Line had become too weak to counter a dedicated German attack of coordinated infantry, artillery, tanks, aircraft, and paratroopers. Perhaps more importantly, political considerations meant that the opening of the Ardennes forest was not properly defended. After all, had they have done so, it would have looked like they were leaving their ally Belgium out to dry. Yet while the density of the forest meant that this opening would have made it impossible for a World War I-era army to break through, by the time the war broke out in 1939, the Germans had the machinery necessary to easily blaze through the densely forested Ardennes region. While most historians believe that France was well aware of these flaws by the time World War II rolled around, it was too late for France to do much about it. While it was hoped that the Maginot Line would be useful enough to give France and its allies enough time to counterattack the Germans, this simply did not happen. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you to our channel members.